Welcome to another episode of the Emma Guns Show. It is my intense delight and pleasure to welcome back to the podcast Dr. Tracy Dennis-Tiwary. Hello.
Emma, it's amazing being with you. Thank you.
It's so good because listeners will remember Tracy came on the podcast a few months ago and it was via Zoom. And we got on like a house on fire. We talked about Darth Vader.
Yes.
Whilst also talking about her incredible book, Future Tense, which is a real exploration into anxiety and mental health as a larger subject. And I did think, this is someone I would get on with in real life. And you're about to witness the magic. It's so good to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for making time.
So excited to speak with you and so fun.
Now, we had what I thought was, for me, definitely as someone who has struggled with anxiety in the past, I found our conversation and also the insights from your book just so valuable and empowering on the topic of anxiety. But the subtitle of the book, it's Why Anxiety Isn't Good For You, is good for you even though it feels bad. And Tracy, how's that been received?
Mixed. There's been mixed reception on that, Emma. You know, it's meant to be a little controversial, that title, but really also to drive home a point that if anxiety didn't feel bad, it wouldn't be doing its job. Mm-hmm. Because anxiety, like a lot of our emotions that stink, that feel terrible, they're all double-edged swords. Mm. And anxiety, it needs to feel bad because it makes us sit up and pay attention and to know, oh, hold on. And you know, anxiety isn't fear. So it's not that there's not a bear about to maul you right in this moment. That's fear because it's certain present threat. Yeah. Anxiety makes us into these time travelers into the future in our minds. And we're looking around the bend and saying, well, what's coming up? And, you know, I have a wonderful podcast interview coming up and it could be terrible. I could bomb it, or it could be a wonderful conversation, which is what I expect. And anxiety primes us to deal with that uncertainty, to make the good outcomes happen, and to really manage uncertainty. So it's not something that evolved to choke us or to get in our way, but it's painful, it's difficult. And so it's like an ally. You have to negotiate with it. You have to work with it.
You said something there, expectations, and I was re-listening to our episode on the way here today, and I actually wrote in capitals in my notebook, expectations, because I wonder, in unraveling my own issues with anxiety in the past, whether I expected life would feel a certain way when. Mm-hmm. And I thought that I would reach a plateau of great, or a plateau of good, or a plateau of calm, and then that would be the forever picture.
Right.
And that the anxiety came from the fact that why is there still bad? Why is there still discomfort?
Right. It's almost this binary, this robotic. And I mean, part of that is mental health professionals' fault because we've conveyed, okay, mental health and happiness, it's all or none. So if you're mentally healthy, it means the absence of emotional discomfort. You've reached this level of something that's unattainable. I think we women are also, everyone's prone to perfectionism, but I think women especially, of this idea that it's 110% perfect or it's terrible. And so we start to weigh ourselves. We don't know when it's good enough, or we don't know, wait a second, it's not actually where I get, it's that in this process of getting there are these amazing things along the way. So I think you're so right, this expectation piece of it and how we prioritize and what we value and how we give value to ourselves. Anxiety actually can help us do that better. It doesn't have to make it worse because anxiety, you're only anxious when you care.
Well, yes.
You know?
Yes. And I said to you on our last conversation that I realized that I look back at my dream job that I had for 10 years. Yeah. And I manufactured anxiety that I displayed in order for the people around me to know that I cared about my job. And I didn't need to do that. I've realized that with time and age and wisdom and whatever else, reflection. But I wonder if we sort of alluded to the fact there may have been a wee bit of pushback to this idea that it's okay to have these feelings of anxiety, whether that's something that you've experienced in the pushback of people saying, well, no, it shouldn't be, you should be anxious. That's a good thing it shows that you care.
We're all born anxious. And so the trick isn't to make it go away. The trick is to be anxious in the right way. But I think you're right. I think we're using it as a signal, and this is where the pushback has come, where, well, wait a second, I'm anxious. That means I'm struggling. It means I might be broken. It means there's something really not working in my life, and I and I need support, or I'm just showing you how hard I'm working. And when we think of it that way, it's not that that's entirely wrong or bad, but we set ourselves up for a whole series of unhelpful things. So if we think about anxiety as a danger signal or the only way to prove that you're in it, and you start cultivating it, or you either cultivate it or you run from it. So you start to, I kind of call it the 3 Fs. You can say you feel it as dangerous, you flee from it, right? You fear it. Like, you start to have this relationship to, or you clutch it so closely to you that this is my identity. This is the reason why things don't work out. And there's no judgment from me in if someone is choosing that or if that's something they're seeing in their life, but it's just not going to work. It's just not helpful. And so the message of my book is really to say, if you can open your mind just a little bit to anxiety, maybe actually being something that you can use instead of be used by, that you can leverage it. You can listen to it as information, as preparation, and then leverage it. You're just going to do more of the helpful things when it comes to coping with anxiety, when it does get you really down, when it really gets in the way. And you're going to find possibilities in anxiety that you never even imagined. I wonder if when you left this job and chose to open another chapter in your life, if that wasn't, in a way, anxiety helping you make this move that you might never have considered before. Because it's, because all of a sudden, well, if that's not working, or I want to do something different, or I'm having this experience, how do I pursue happiness and success and wellness in another way? Anxiety is kind of pointing you to those other possibilities.
Well, that's the thing. It's almost as if what you were describing there a little bit is using anxiety as a scapegoat for not to do something, or for the reason why something went wrong. And it removes, I say this a lot on the show, but I don't like delegating accountability for one's life or removing yourself from it, one space or whatever. And it seems as though anxiety has kind of fallen into that space of, well, I'm anxious, so that's why that didn't work, or I'm anxious, so that's why I can't do that thing.
That's right.
So it's life limiting. If anyone's experienced anxiety, it is limiting in the moment, but it's even limiting as a concept.
100%. It's just getting in your way. So you can judge it as good or bad, or, Tracy, you're full of it because, you don't understand I have an anxiety disorder. But whether you have a disorder or it's just the day-to-day struggles we have, if you shift your focus to anxiety as being something, wait a second, it doesn't own me. It's actually part of the messy work of being human. It's a feature of being human. It's this double-edged sword. All of a sudden you start realizing, okay, sometimes it's going to get in my way, but I have the power and the ability and the innovation and the creativity to start working with this. And what if I could use it? What if, when the pandemic shut everything down for everyone, my husband, who's in the entertainment industry, he had just launched a show on Broadway called Jagged Little Pill. With
Alanis Morissette.
Yes, with Alanis Morissette. And they told us, and it took 10 years to mount the show. From, soup to nuts, and all the incredible creativity and all the incredible people working on this project. And within 5 months of launching, it was done because of the pandemic. Now, it was able to relaunch, and it's on tour, and it's doing things, but that was a pretty devastating blow. So it's at that moment, it makes a lot of sense to say, now I'm anxious, what next? And to decide that maybe I wait, maybe I shut down. But he did something pretty incredible, and I don't want to brag about my husband, but what he saw was that there were other possibilities, and he knew that, and he's a producer, but he's the kind of producer who tells stories. He gets amazing artists, musicians together with amazing writers and storytellers. And he saw, well, wait a second, I'm not limited to a certain platform. I don't have to just be on the stage. I've been doing these other TV and things like that. What if I just become platform nimble? What if I form a new company, kind of create a different model, and now we can do the same amazing work, but we're expanded now. So rather than this incredibly, believe me, we were all, it wasn't like it was easy, we weren't like, let's be anxious.
You took a hit.
It was a hit. It's a lucky people hit because we're very blessed in so many ways, but it was a hit. But what he was able to do was not just pivot, but was to expand what those possibilities were, because anxiety let him center on what he actually loved about his job, let go of what wasn't needed. So it's a sort of alchemy. when we can ride this wave of anxiety.
Yeah.
We were talking about Hawaii before, and that is on the list for both of us. I'm sure that surfers could speak to this. Like you could drown in a wave, but you can swim, you can surf, you can sail, but you have to get in it. And you have to build skills. And we don't think of anxiety as a skill building arena. We think of it as I have a disease or a dysfunction. But actually, we're born anxious, and we can learn the skills to be anxious in ways that serve us. And that's the message of the book, really.
When I first was diagnosed with severe anxiety, I spoke to a friend of mine who is not a mental health professional, but made an observation from knowing me quite well for a long time. And her observation was, it's just as though you don't have any coping mechanisms. And trust me, that was really hard to hear. Not one of my favorite moments, but actually one of the moments in my life where I think I actually did need to hear that.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And that's when I then went into therapy and said, right, this is everything that is going on in my life. Actually, I realized that a lot of the reasons why I had reached a place where I did break down and I went to a therapist and I needed help putting myself back together is because everything that had happened to me up to that point, I hadn't coped with.
Yeah.
It had almost just, everything was wounding. And it just meant that I had run out of energy to be able to live.
I mean, that's an incredible experience to share, because I think that's the heart of it for most of us. And, I have not struggled, I want to be frank too, I have not struggled with anxiety disorders, but I have struggled with clinical depression. And it's the same, that sort of owning that aspect of what's working for me and what's not. It doesn't mean that we have to think that we have a disease like cancer or COVID and we have to just eradicate all the things that are wrong with us. That's not how mental health, most of the time, for most of the struggles we have, works. It's saying, what can I own? What can I control? What are the habits of thinking, of choosing that are actually getting in my way? And I don't have to feel bad about that. But any good therapist will tell you, they'll actually, when it comes to anxiety, they'll probably tell you a lot of what's in the book. In the sense of, this is a skill you can build. There are habits you can break. You can build new ones. And an anxiety disorder is only diagnosed when the ways we're coping with anxiety aren't working for us. It's not because we have anxiety. It's because what we're doing to cope is just not working.
I think that's the thing. It's like anything that happened, you get an email from someone that you don't like the tone of, it's wounding, or it sort of sets you back. And it's developing that mechanism of, no, I can deal with this. I don't like their tone, but I will go back with a neutralizing one, or whatever it might be. But then we get into what I think can be quite dodgy territory, and it's something that I have had pushback in my own life when I've had this conversation. Because I don't want to say that having anxiety is a choice. Like, I certainly never chose to be as anxious as I was and for it to limit my life in the way that I did. But in recovering and building the necessary mental gym that I needed, I did make choices about how I would react to things. So how, from your perspective, this idea of you can choose your way out of anxiety, and even to an extent, I would say that I also use the same techniques and mechanisms with depression too.
I love that you put it that way, because when I think about the steps to making those choices and building those skills, they really are tiny steps. We mental health professionals, it's become sort of this predatory, like the self-help world and the psychological world, not by intention, but because everything is a checklist. We have to do that. And then if you don't check 10 out of 10 boxes, you're not a good parent. You're not a healthy person. You're not. So it's this, and we forget that actually it's this one choice, one step at a time. And for me, and the reason, again, that I wrote the book is the first step that we have to correct is the mindset that we have. So the story that we're telling about anxiety, the beliefs we have, if we don't change those beliefs, nothing is going to work. Because the beliefs we have are that it's a dysfunction, it's a disease, and it means that we're damaged. And again, it primes us to do just automatically those unhelpful things. And it's really, it's avoidance. It's that you fear it, you flee from it, and you start to believe that you're not capable of rising to the occasion. So you're limiting yourself. You're putting yourself in the comfort zone all the time. And nothing great ever happened in the comfort zone.
No, that's so true. It's life limiting, but that's actually a way I hadn't thought of it before. It's actually, you're just keeping yourself comfortable. And as you say, nothing really comes from staying in the same place.
Yeah, and nothing great, but even anything that's really nourishing or as tuned in, because you're so busy doing these mechanics and these acrobatics of managing that pain and fearing that it will break you. But if you, and listen, so we do get knocked down. Sometimes you just have to crawl into bed and get up the next morning and hope for the best, you know? But if you have this thought that the only way through this is around, the only way out is through. There is just no other way. So if that's the case, which I truly believe it is, if you can change this mindset, then you'll start to make some different choices. You'll start to say in that moment you get that really mean email, or you had that really huge disappointment. Your toolkit gets larger, and all of a sudden you say, I don't just have to manage it or make it go away. So, for example, you know, I know that all the kids got their results for their exams today, and I also, a wonderful friend, Matt Crosby, and his daughter Fleur, I was with them just as they were getting these results, and I mean, we Americans just don't know what it's like to go through that the anxiety of that and the stress of that. But it's an incredible gift in some ways too.
Is it not the same in the States?
Oh no, nothing like this.
SAT results not.
It's nothing like this.
Okay.
Because that's just a test, and they matter, but you can take them again, and it's not subjects, and it's not, and it doesn't determine what kind of program you can pursue at university. So none of those stakes are there. So, and it fascinates me that this has not been, you know, it's not been squelched, this system. And I'm sure and here I am, this American saying, it's not, I think there's big problems with it, as I'm sure. I'm not educated enough to know all the details of it. I can see there's serious problems. But one thing that was remarkable to hear everyone talk about, oh yeah, when I got A's, but I got C's in that, and just to have gone through that, though, and come out very strong in many areas, done it together as a community, kind of suffered through it together. You know, there's something, if your mindset about these exams and about your anxiety around them is one of, listen, I'm going to persevere. Anxiety, yes, I have it. I'm going to persist because I know what I want. If I don't get the A's in that area I want, well, now I have new opportunities and options. Yes, some close down, but their anxiety helps you see that others have opened up because it's priming you. You know, when you're anxious, dopamine increases in your brain. What does dopamine do? It's the sex, drugs, and rock and roll neurotransmitter, but more importantly, it's the neurotransmitter that floods our brain when we want to work towards something. It helps make our brain more efficient to make our dreams come true. So when we're anxious, it actually primes us to, if we're open to it, if we take that step back with this mindset and say, all right, I hate this is terrible, let me take a breath and say, what is anxiety pointing me to? What purpose, what possibility, what potential? And when we do that, it might not fix everything, it probably won't, but it will help with some things, and it might open up a possibility, like it did for my husband, of something he just wouldn't have pursued otherwise.
I'm just imagining that your husband just started like the 2022 version of VH1 Storytellers, from what you're saying.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
And I was watching VH1 Behind the Music on the way, but this morning, and I was like, I really missed this. So that's just.
It's wonderful. Thank you. I'm gonna make a little pitch on that.
But talking about exams and results, actually, the thing that, as you were talking, I was thinking about is, I was really bad at school. I wanted to be a backing singer with Guns N' Roses, and that's what I was focused on.
As most of us did. Yeah.
But the route to get there from a small town in rural Kent, I just couldn't figure it out. But I had a good 6 years before I even did my GCSEs and A-levels, where I was not working with the system. And that meant that there was this prolonged period of stress of knowing that I could never get my head around how to take exams. Some people are brilliant at doing interviews, and some people are brilliant at taking exams. That's a skill in and of itself. And so when I eventually did, so I had that sort of burn, that really slow, horrible burn of stress for those years. Then I flunked my A-levels. But speaking to your dopamine, my English teacher, Mrs. Riddell, God rest her soul, who was one of the most influential people in my life, collared me. And when I say I loved her, and I think she might have loved me.
That was tough love.
But she collared me and said, you drive down to the University of Kent. You drive down there now, and you go and speak to the undergraduate admissions officer, and you tell him who you are. And I was like, okay. Wow. And would I have done that had I not been primed and like, I have to do something with all of this? Like, it was a disappointment. And huge anxiety about going home and saying, I'm not going to be able to get into university.
Yeah.
Because I would have probably been one of the only ones. Which would have been
that's brutal, but it's brutal. It's brutal. But you did something with that. So it's this, again, it can point you to, well, it probably made you drill down into what really mattered to you. So you had to work in this system, and it was not a good fit for you, right? But you had to navigate it and decide to what degree do I need to be in the system and figure it out. You have social support, which is a huge part of anxiety. Because when we have that community, and, that is one of the best ways to cope with anxiety. We think that sometimes we're anxious and we kind of shut down, and we do. But another kind of a nice biological aspect of anxiety is that also increases oxytocin in our blood, which is the social bonding hormone. So if we open ourselves a little bit when we're anxious, be a little curious about it, we also may see, yeah, I do want to reach out to my sister. I do want to reach out to my best friend, to that teacher who will support me. And it's always that social support, because we're social animals, that usually allows us to draw on our most of our resources. Our brains are actually wired to outsource stress and to find that human connection so that we can work better. And so, and then I think you have found this you have created something incredible. I was also hearing that you were really early to develop podcasts, like to really lean in on podcasts.
In the UK, yeah.
In the UK. Yeah. But that's a bold and a move that anxiety could have stopped if you took it as something that choked you. But here's this, okay, I'm building something new, and you saw this possibility of podcasts that probably a lot of other people didn't see. But I would argue that you were probably leaning in on that anxiety in a way that maybe you didn't think of it that way. I don't know, but
I like this.
But because it could have been, okay, I'm doing this new thing. Should I just stay the course, or should I do what everyone's doing, or how do I? And you said, well, I have this other dream, and how do I get there? Wait, there's this thing called podcasts, and yeah, maybe it's not the thing now, but you had this vision. So I think anxiety was probably a helpmate to you in those moments.
Yes, it was just finessing my relationship with it as other things happened. But the way you're just describing it there made me think about, I think for a long time I wanted to be a follower. I wanted to be a sheep. I wanted to be included. Like everyone at school had DM boots. I wanted DM boots. But I don't have the legs for them. So I have this real urge to be part of the tribe, I guess. So if you want to take it down to a sort of basic thing. But then whenever I've got anywhere near close to this tribeness, I rebel and I go off in a completely different direction. Sorry to have made this a personal session, but she's flown over for this. But that's just the way you were just describing it made me think about that. Think about, is there some sort of mechanism in me that actually anxiety isn't something I've overcome? It's something which I think is probably how I would have viewed it prior to this conversation. Maybe it's something I have exactly as you've described, and it's just taken a while to McFly, that I have learned to listen to and to use as a real positive.
You've leveraged it to purpose. And maybe at those moments that you broke away from the tribe, or maybe the herd, you realized that you needed to pursue this purpose. You needed to do something different. And anxiety can help us do that.
Whereas an observer might say that's pig-headedness, that's stupidity, that's sort of these things, and it's actually...
People have accused me of that as well. Anxiety is my superpower. They're like, actually, you're just very, very stubborn and obnoxious.
Okay, well, where does stubborn come into it? Because stubborn is something I've tried to bash out of myself, but that...
Oh, no, don't do that. No. And especially as women, too, because, people don't like that. And they don't like us getting angry either. They get scared of us, but they probably should, honestly. Anxiety, because it's this focusing emotion, it's not fear, and it feels like fear, it's very immediate, but anxiety, because it's moving us to pursue goals, it doesn't necessarily broaden us in the moment, it does focus us. So when we're focused on this dream we want to make happen and averting disaster, it helps us pursue goals even when obstacles are really being thrown our way. So that persistence and focus, it's really necessary most of the time. And not only that, innovation. So there's great research to show when we're anxious, we become more creative when a big problem-solving task is thrown our way. We think more outside the box. We actually have more innovative solutions, in part because we're stubbornly persisting in problem solving. Because anxiety, because it's a sort of this cycle, right, where you feel anxious, you want it to go away. And so you take action to make it go away. Now that can be a vicious cycle if you're feeling it as dangerous, you're fleeing from it, you're fearing it, if you're doing those kind of 3 Fs. But it becomes a very virtuous cycle when we're using anxiety as information that we listen to and that we know we can leverage to a sense of purpose. And then we have to then know how to let it go. So it's this real alchemy and flexibility that you gain with anxiety that allows you to use it.
Because that's making me think of when one may have feelings of anxiety, the instinct to self-soothe. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we can both talk about, we probably both have self-soothing behaviors that we probably wouldn't do in public, probably wouldn't want other people to know about. But equally, it can be the thing that can, for example, if I'm working from home, I've got a lot of work on, sometimes I can get so in it that I think, I'm just going to lie down and have a nap. And then when I wake up, I'll be invigorated. I've never woken up from a nap and been invigorated. I've woken up from a nap and been grumpy and hungry and even more tired.
Yeah.
But if I say to you, I've got so much to do, but I've got a massive roadblock in my head, I'm going to go to the cinema. Now, that might seem like I'm taking time off, but that is my pure escapism. I get to switch off for 90 minutes to 120 minutes, and it frees up. It just allows everything, all the pages, the tabs to close and reload.
I love that because right, you could call it escapism, but when I say that we need to know when to let go, you listen to anxiety, you try to, take action on it. If it's telling you I'm anxious about a test, you study more and then the anxiety goes down you. But sometimes it's free floating. Sometimes we're still sorting out what it is. Sometimes it's something that really it's not going away and it's as you were saying, this sort of long-term thing. Yeah. We need those skills to let go. And the letting go are things, the most helpful things are things that help us think in these sort of adjacent, different ways. I like to write poetry, and it is very bad poetry most of the time. But and I do love to binge my streaming services. But again, it helps you think in this kind of let go of whatever little mind knot is there. So if that's a movie for you, that's great. For some people, it's exercise. I wish I was more of that person. That would be handy. But find something that lets you find the flow, think in a different way. And those are another set of skills to let go. So I really don't mean to suggest just white knuckle it through anxiety all the time and just hype yourself up. It's a flexibility. And so at each point of listening to it, leveraging it, letting go, you can build skills in each of those bins, each of those areas. And that's the task of being human.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's this idea of, which we obviously are covering, is the fact that anxiety isn't a failure. And I think one of the phrases that you used last time was we can see it as a failure to happiness, or a failure to be happy.
Yeah.
And that's not
And then you're
accurate.
screwed. You feel like, then I'm screwed. I've failed at this. I mean, happiness actually has nothing to do with being happy all the time. I think we know that intuitively, and I think psychologists and scientists have sort of come around to that too. There's no way to sustain this constant. Americans are the worst because we're always smiling and we have to be happy and we have to, it's very, and it just is, it is a blocker. It's an opportunity cost in actually seeing, sometimes having a good cry is what it means to be happy. Sometimes, going into, there's a great study that came out of, I think it was in 2008, out of Harvard, where they took folks who were socially anxious, clinically socially anxious. So, when you really don't feel you can leave the house, or you're so frightened of judgment and humiliation, and it really blocks people. It's a disease. It's an anxiety disorder. But they brought them in and had them do this kryptonite task for them, which was to give an impromptu public speech. And a lot of people would believe, if you're socially anxious, well, I'm going to start panicking. I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm going to fail. I'm going to be humiliated. There was a panel of judges who were about to judge them on this public speech, which is just really, for all of us, it's hard. I'm feeling like my heart
I'm already
racing.
feeling a bit under the collar.
But what this study showed is that that if you can change your mindset, even if you're clinically anxious about this challenge and your reaction to it, a lot can change. So they taught these folks in just 10 or 15 minutes, they said, your heart's going to start racing. You're going to sweat. You might feel faint. You're going to feel these things. But that's not you getting ready to fail or to panic. That's your body and mind preparing to act, to go into high gear. So your heart is beating because it's sending oxygen to your brain so you can concentrate. They just sort of laid out the science a little bit. They talked about how Darwin had written about emotions as adapt. It was actually the third book in his trilogy on evolutionary theory. It was called the expression of emotion in man and animals. Yeah, it was all about emotion. A third of his theory is about emotions and how adaptive they are, especially anger, fear, rage, sadness. But so anyway, they were like me. These psychologists were like me and like boring people with these scientific facts. But they taught them these ideas for just 10 or 15 minutes, and then they had them go and do the speech. And another group of people they didn't teach to change their mindset. Those folks who did the speech then, their heart rates were slower. They did better through objective like measurements, like you would grade them on their performance, on their speech, and their blood pressure was lower. So their bodies actually looked like people not who were panicking, but who were primed to perform at their best. And these were folks who were really struggling with anxiety in their lives, and they were able to do this. We can build those skills every day when we go into a challenge and say, all right, I'm about to come talk with Emma. I love Emma, but I'm feeling a little nervous. I'm drinking my water. I'm getting, but you can say, well, that means I'm ready to have a great conversation with Emma. That means I'm excited. I'm nerve excited. That means, and it doesn't fix everything, but it will get better every time you do that. You will build those skills like any other kind of skill.
It really makes me think about the importance of vocabulary. And I think that was one of the things that I really learned to change. I previously had used very negative, very down vocabulary. I'm not even sure why or how I developed that, but it was definitely, I think, some sort of protective mechanism. If I was speaking that way, then I had no business expecting good or things to go well, maybe. It was that sort of weird trade-off that I was making. And then I committed to changing my vocabulary. And as you say, nervous went to excited or any of those things. And again, it was something that we touched on in the last episode. But I was thinking about a conversation I had with Chris Voss, who's the FBI negotiator. And one of the skills that he uses in his negotiation training is labeling emotion. When you're negotiating with somebody, if we were having a tense conversation, and not in a patronizing way, but I would say, Tracy, it seems like you're upset about this. Right.
That's so hard not to be patronizing when you say that. That's right, yeah.
That's my best Chris Voss impression. Seems like you're upset about this. He's got the most incredible voice as well, which really helps. But it's just labeling it and then leaving it and sitting back and then letting the conversation go from there.
It's that space. And when you label too, when we have feelings, especially anxiety, it's not always easy to know exactly what it is. It's just yucky. Or it's this free-floating stuff, right? So labeling it is such a powerful first step. It gives you that space. What you name it opens up completely different options that come after. So, right, if you're excited, that opens up all sorts of different next steps, decision trees, possibility. Then if, I'm about to, I'm panicking. I had someone say to me once, it was one of the most beautiful, actually, with talking about this book and getting out there, one of the most beautiful, inspiring things anyone has said. She said, I've always, not always, I've never thought of myself as an anxious person until the past few years. And then I started labeling myself as that. And it just didn't fit who I was. And what I realize now from what you're saying is that I'm not a person who struggles with anxiety. I'm a person who struggles with hope. Because anxiety, the flip side of anxiety is hope. It's about future possibilities, bad and good. And once you shift from saying, I'm not struggling with, about to have a breakdown. I'm struggling with all the things I'm hoping for and striving for and wanting in my life. It changes everything.
That's such an incredible reframe that it's almost like it's like a factory reboot, isn't it? Just like
it feels like it. And when she said it was a reboot for me, because I talked about hope and but for someone to say to struggle with hope. So now that language is even more interesting because it's not just the positive, it's that you're struggling with it, and that it's okay to struggle with it. And maybe emotions aren't this state, as you said, like you're happy and you get to there or you don't. It's not static. Emotions are dynamic. They're changing. It's never forever. So, someone might come to you and say, I'm feeling really sad. And you're like, sadness isn't forever. Same goes for happiness, sister. The same goes for everything. And we just I think we just don't feel we have resilience anymore, or that we need that language of trauma. to explain the pain of what we're going through and to get really important mental health conversations happening. But we don't need to have the language of trauma to have better and more conversations about mental health. I think that's blocking it in the end.
Agreed. And I think in recent years where we've become so much more open in our discussions of mental health, we have way more vocabulary than we've ever had before. We had the umbrella term of stress. How are you feeling? I'm stressed. Everyone used to say that. Everyone. Mm-hmm. Now it'll be so much more granular. And it means that we've got more room to play with.
Yeah. And why have the language of trauma being the room we play with? Mm-hmm. I mean, why not have it be the language of challenge, of joy, of excitement, of possibility? It's just a flip the switch. Mm-hmm. And again, we should acknowledge our pain. We should acknowledge when we're anxious. We should seek help with a psychologist, with a psychiatrist. But it does not mean that everything we do from here on out is what a broken person is doing. It actually means, oh, now you're doing that messy work, that great work of what it actually takes to find the kind of really the art of living.
Again, the vocabulary piece is so important, isn't it? And even if someone's listening to this and they think, well, I do struggle with anxiety, I get nervous about this, or I feel like I'm on low-grade anxiety at all times because I'm always anticipating something from my boss or something from my partner or what have you. It's that, well, if you can in any way just flip some of the words that you're using to describe
the words,
that.
Own it, because it's going to own you. What you don't own owns you. That's like a truism. Own it. You can say it's low grade, it's too much, it's draining, yes. Own it, see if there's anything useful in it. And anxiety is most useful to us when we hitch it to a sense of purpose. Something greater than ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean we have to be Mother Teresa or that we have to have a great mission in life. It's just what gives your life flavor, meaning, joy. It's like, you can Marie Kondoize your life. Like, what is sparking joy? And who does not love Marie Kondo? But it's the same psychologically. Like, what are the choices or the things we're doing, or what are ugly feelings? They feel ugly, right? Our yucky feelings are telling us that can lead us to something that's going to spark a little bit more joy. That's purpose.
Is there something a little bit addictive? Might be the wrong word, but seductive might be in the better neighborhood.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, I like where you're going. Yeah,
about anxious feelings and negative emotions, because if you speak to certainly in my experience, and I guess speaking to friends of mine, we will always use the term spiral.
It's a fascinating thing. Yes, it is the word now, right? There are discussions out there about anxiety as like a bad habit, or as a spiral, right? But the truth is, there are two types of cycles in anxiety. One is a vicious cycle, and one is a virtuous cycle. And so, yes, it's spiraling, but you can spiral up or you can spiral down. So the vicious cycle is sort of what I described with those 3 F's. You feel anxiety in your body and your mind as dangerous, so you flee from it, you avoid it. And that always makes anxiety worse, right? And when you flee, fear, and flee, what you're doing is first of all, it's like an opportunity cost. You're losing the opportunity to gain skills. And avoidance always makes anxiety worse. It's like, it's always what you suppress comes back stronger. That's the cycle that they're talking about. That's the spiraling. But we can disrupt that. And shifting a mindset and language is the way to do it. So you disrupt that cycle. You take a step back from it and say, okay, what if I instead listened, right? Instead of felt it was dangerous. And what if I leveraged whatever information and preparation anxiety gives me? So if anxiety really can make us more persistent and innovative and tell us what we care about in life, why aren't we effing using that emotion? Why are we just trying to soothe it all the time? Like, oh, Emma, you're anxious. Can I just give you a couple?
Pat me on the head.
Yeah. I mean, yes, sometimes, listen, I need a pat on the head once in a while. But if that's our default response every single time, we're not seeing that we're still powerhouses, even when we feel like really exhausted. We're not seeing that I can do something with this. So, so then the cycle becomes you listen, you leverage, and then you let go. Don't start with letting go. Don't start with suppressing. Yeah. Let yourself journey through it a bit.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I took away from our last conversation is that I'm a fantasist, but in a good way. Keanu Reeves features.
Oh, come on. You can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong with that. And I've had some very, they felt real. daydreams about those situations. So, and no judgment here from anyone who may have had the same thing. And I feel very comfortable telling you that. But one of the things I took away from our last conversation is that if I didn't, that ability to see into the future with Keanu,
it's a wonderful dream.
A parallel reality. Is a skill that is also goes hand in hand with those feelings of anxiety because it's the future gazing. So in a way, it made me think, well, I'm really glad that I have the propensity to be highly anxious. And like Keanu and I've had some really amazing moments.
It's so beautiful. I mean, really, that's why, I sometimes talk about anxiety as this triumph of human evolution. It is because of that imaginative ability, because that is human. To really simulate and imagine this beautiful life with Keanu in the future. Only humans do that as far as we know. With that degree of granularity and exquisite detail.
Yeah, I'm on the back of his bike.
Exquisite. So exquisite. And so anxiety lives in that space because anxiety is what's priming us to say, okay, in that detailed future I'm imagining, there is some disaster that could happen. But here's where I want it to go. Here's the dream I want. And so what it's doing is it's helping you with vividness. It's making you it has to feel bad.
Yeah.
Because you have to sit up and pay attention. It's like that smoke alarm. Okay, something might be happening. We don't ignore smoke alarms. We don't just maybe we disconnect them after we've checked the house, but we check the house first. We check that there's a battery. Yeah, we do. But that comes after. We make sure that the house isn't on fire. But anxiety's that way too. So it helps us use this incredible, beautiful, imaginative ability and it lives in that space. Creativity lives in that space.
Well, and this is what I was coming back to. I got slightly taken off course by Keanu.
I know. But where's that water?
It's the creativity aspect of it. And it's also this thing of like imagining what's possible. I was chatting to someone the other day and I said, sometimes I think one of the things that I do to myself that sometimes works against me is that I dream big. And as soon as it's a thought in my head, I think, well, then it could be possible. And if someone else is living that reality, I think, well, I know for sure it's definitely possible. Yeah. And then I will live in that space where, well, I want it to happen then. What do I need to do to make it happen? Yeah. So dreams, having big dreams is a great thing. Yeah. But it can also make you feel like you're a failure at times if you're not getting to this destination.
It can, but if you can deal with that pain of failure, what happens is you say, well, you become an excellencist instead of a perfectionist. And an excellencist knows that perfect doesn't exist. And it's a monkey on your back. Like you cannot. Like it is punishing. It will always knock you down. There's no way to meet those standards for any real sustained period of time. An excellencist is one, like Thomas Edison, the inventor, was an excellencist because he said, I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work yet.
Yes.
Right? And so if you can deal with that pain of failure, you can see, wait, I can be excellent when I fail because I can learn from it. Again, you can own it and say, well, I really bombed that one or I sucked on that one. But there's some piece of this that tells me what I need to do better or some piece where actually I did shine there. And you take it as information and it will take you to the next level. But if we reject our failures, if we don't live in them and kind of, cuddle up with them a little bit sometimes, it's again, we're missing out on something that could transform our life.
One of the best bits of business advice I've ever been given was someone who said to me, never take business advice from someone who hasn't failed.
That's perfection. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And, it's funny when I was writing Future Tense, I got the book deal just before the pandemic hit. 3 or 4 weeks. We were still hugging and people were starting to wear masks and we're like,
whatever.
Pandemic, we were... And then 2 weeks later, but the deal went through, and I'm writing the book in the pandemic, and I'd never written a popular book. I'm like a fuddy-duddy scientist, so I just write these peer-reviewed scientific articles. But I'm writing, and my publisher gave me a little feedback in the beginning, saying, "Okay, good, keep going." Everything was falling apart. No one gave me feedback. I just kept going, and I wrote chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 2. I wrote 6 chapters, and then I finally got it to the publisher, and they gave me feedback and said, "This is terrible." What? This is absolutely horrible. And you need to get some outside editorial help, and you need this and you need that. So, of course, the anxiety for me went through the absolute freaking roof. But I cried a little. I did whatever. I got angry. I did all the thing. I felt all the feels. And then I said, okay, I want this. This is what really matters to me. And I've never written a book. I might suck at it. I actually think I have something to say.
Yes.
I'm just going to, so I did what I had to do. I went back to I have literary agents. They connected me with the best editor on the planet, Bill Tonelli, who's a fellow Italian-American. Like, he's like my uncle. He's like every Italian-American uncle I've ever had. And so brilliant. And he said to me, Tracy, I mean, of course, this is the opposite is true. He's like, I'm moderately intelligent and I know nothing about this topic. Let's throw out everything you wrote. Start with a blank page. Tell me the story. And through that, and we had 3 weeks per chapter with a blank page. And when I tell you that it's 100 times better because of that relationship with Bill, and honestly, I think because my openness to fail, and to have enough faith in myself and to know that perfect wasn't the goal, but that I can step by step it's 100 times better than it ever would have been.
And it also wasn't just on you. It didn't have
community.
To be. Yeah.
And Bill he just sent me an article the other day. It was actually from the Financial Times, an educator who wrote about the exams and exam anxiety. He's like, Tracy, he wrote at the top and mailed it to me, and he'll text me. He's like, oh, you were owning anxiety in this. I mean, he's amazing. He's like my father confessor / consigliere / editor.
Has to be Italian American. Has to be a consigliere.
But that is what anxiety brought me, those gifts, and I think hopefully a better book that can speak to more people because I was able to do better.
It's the leaning into the failure aspect, and I guess the criticism as well.
Oh yeah.
What piece does that fit into the
being
puzzle?
A scientist helps with that because it's constant and kind of unrelenting criticism. But we know, we serve hopefully something greater than ourselves, which is knowledge and science. And we know that that's the only way. So peer review is by definition brutal. So they'll tear it apart. Like you can't get a grant without going through a brutalizing process of, well, this method is flawed, and what do you mean here, and this doesn't make sense, and you didn't cite this, and you didn't, and you've written a 100-page grant, or you have a scientific paper where there is, And scientists get very good at being brutal, but in very kind of uber intellectual, kind of polite ways.
That's a weird thing, isn't it? It's like you go through it and then you get to the position where you're doing it to someone else.
A lot of people are kind. You always know a grad student, though, because they have to prove themselves. And so they're extra nitpicky and nasty. And you just say, oh, God, another grad student. Sorry to you, grad student. I have wonderful grad students who would never do such a thing. But it's brutalizing. But that was a wonderful gift for me because, again, I think we scientists have to learn. You have to take it. You have to know the value and maybe what's not valuable and take it to make what you're doing stronger. And it always makes it stronger. Almost always. It will make it stronger.
Are we coddling a little bit too much in modern culture? This is sort of a much bigger question about the failure aspect of it, because you get your participation medals. I talked about exams at school. I was one of the stupid ones. I was also not sporty. So I was very good at coming last in the swimming, the running, the whatever. So I never had a win. It's like the whole of my school years, I never had a win. I actually said to a teacher at my school at prize giving, could you just find like some dinged up old cup in the attic and just give it to me just to prove I was here? And they did, and it hadn't even been polished. It was just and I don't even know what I did with it. But the point is, at the time that felt really harsh. I felt invisible. I felt quite worthless. I internalized it.
Yeah.
But I was also told I could never make it as a journalist because I was stupid. I couldn't get the grades.
Yeah.
No, they didn't tell me I was stupid. I told me I couldn't get the grades. They did also tell me that I couldn't be a backing singer with Guns N' Roses, but we'll talk about that off tape.
That's another, yeah.
But would I have been as tenacious as I have been with my media career had I not felt like I was fighting against something?
No. Can you swear on this podcast?
Yes.
Fuck them, number one. And it was your ability to say that, right, that I think has led to something that you would never dream that a non-smart, you are the last person in the planet that I would peg as, oh, she's not smart, she's not this, she's not that. Now, I think that good education finds wins for everyone and just lets them know it doesn't have to be first place. Yes. That's what it is. But we're always on this spectrum of we coddle or we're like, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And it's so hard to be in the nuanced, messy middle. But that's where we have to be when it comes to this stuff. I think we, one point that it was a great article in the Financial Times that Bill sent me. A point that the educator made was that, listen, kids need support. Anxiety disorders are real. But if when they're struggling, we say, oh, they've been through the pandemic, they've been through so much, let's just let them not come to school for a week. That is also not the answer. Mm-hmm. And having more discussions about mental health does not mean they're the right discussions. And so we have to draw back from this, because for decades, we wanted more discussions about mental health. You know what I mean? We wanted more awareness and comfort. And now everyone says, well, you got what you wanted. You got it. But the problem is that if the language, if the discussions are that, oh, they have trauma because they went through pandemic, and therefore they're anxious, and therefore they're broken, and they shouldn't be made to go to school. There's no win in that for anyone.
You are so right. And I'm thinking about every single news feature I've watched or read about the mental health crisis. And I have also had people on the show talk about the mental health crisis from the pandemic being the second pandemic. And I've heard about all the trauma that these poor kids, and I must admit, being a teenager going through those 2 years,
it's
horrendous.
Terrible. It's horrendous.
However, I've never heard anyone say this generation might be the most mentally strong generation that we've ever produced.
I think that's actually true. If we stop coddling them and telling them they're broken, because we're always maligning them. We're like, oh, you're screen addicted, you're too emotional, or you're too this, you're too that. I think if we just give them a chance to actually confront these incredibly difficult, the uncertainty they're facing in the world that we have handed them, P.S., this crappy situation. If we take a minute to tell them, no, actually, you don't have to be shaken by these things in the world around you. I had this wonderful young woman that I've been starting to collaborate with, Anastasia Vlasova, her name is actually. She is very active in the digital wellness community. She can't be 20 years old yet. I know she's like a sophomore or junior at NYU. She's amazing. And we were talking about kind of her I'm a Gen Xer, and we were having one of those generational talks. She said, I just think my peers believe that they're going to be broken by this really difficult world around them, that they will be batted around and knocked down. She said, I feel that way sometimes, but I know that I can't be shaken, who I am fundamentally. And I just don't think my peers are always helped to believe that or have come to believe that. She wasn't laying blame anywhere. And she's like, so I just know I can't be shaken. And I just need to take that forward and do the things I need to do in life. I think they're going to save the planet. I mean, I think if we stop hating on them constantly. Mm-hmm. And part of that, I think, stop hating on them is not painting them with this brush of fragility. Because they are not fragile. Mm-hmm. They're anti-fragile. They grow stronger with adversity. They need support. And yes, you sometimes need to see a psychologist. Like, I think everyone could benefit from that. Yes, people have anxiety disorders. They are real. Yes, they have clinical depression. But there's not a but after that. There's an and. And we can support them through that. And they're not broken. And they can build skills.
But if we are constantly telling them that they have embedded trauma that they are going to have to somehow work through, they're not going to reach their potential, which is the story.
No. Yeah. And that's the whole cancel culture debate too. Like, oh, they need to be protected from uncomfortable ideas. It's not helpful. 99% of the time. Hate speech, yes. Bigotry, yes. But uncomfortable discussions and feelings, I mean, the original safe spaces that the father of social psychology, Kurt Lewin, developed were started after World War II to deal with racism and anti-Semitism in the workplace. And what he created was a format in which people could have not easy conversations or safe conversations, but like emotionally intense conversations. So you would come and say, I am a white woman, and I'm a boss, and I think that the men that work for me are stupid. And I know that's bigoted, and I shouldn't feel this way, but it's actually something I'm struggling with. I want to change. Mm-hmm. And so she would not be canceled. She would not be, she'd be critiqued, but she wouldn't be criticized. And people would come in a safe space to work with her to work through that and make things better. Mm-hmm. If she didn't feel that she could say that, if they didn't have a raw emotional conversation that was painful, and really, really messy, they would not have been able to then get her and get the community to a place where they can make better decisions about how things worked in the workplace or how hires were made or whatever. You have to have that difficult conversation. The safe ones aren't going to take us there.
Difficult conversations. Now, I know that our time together is drawing to a close, but I want to ask you about something that is about 15 years ago, I was making a decision about whether to move into an apartment. And it was a big decision. And I remember at the time, I was lingering in this point of, do I stay where I am? Do I move into this apartment? Do I move area? All of these things. And I was on a shoot. And the photographer said to me, he's like, do you know what you're doing? You're staying in the most uncomfortable place that you could stay mentally when it comes to the situation that you're in, because you're at a crossroads. Wow. And instead of choosing which direction you want to go in, you are staying with all four options just shouting at you at all times.
I wonder if he saw it in your body too, which is why I laughed a little bit. I wonder if he detected
wanted me to
it.
Shut up. I think he was just over.
Oh, you were talking about
just like talking. I think he was just like, for the love of Mike, just make a decision just so I can get on with my job. But I do, after he said that to me, I did take it on board, and I did think, actually, when one has to make a decision, the most uncomfortable part of that decision is the not making it. Yeah. And then when you make it, you can move forward with purpose and all of the things that we've described anxiety can do. You can still take the anxiety with you, but it's on the journey with you. For anyone who's listening to this who may feel as though they're at a crossroads in their life or may feel that they want to make a decision, is there any sage advice you can give about what to do in that moment when you have almost too much choice? Yeah,
I love that example. So much of this is about actually knowing what to let go of, right? And anxiety, again, it feels bad because it is priming us to do something. So often when we take, so you have 4 choices ahead of you, right? It's extremely uncomfortable. It's uncertain. You're anxious. The minute someone once told me, draw, if you had 4 choices, draw the 4 possibilities out of a hat. And then how do you feel when you choose that one? This is your gut. This is anxiety. So your gut instinct is the same as anxiety. It's telling you, okay, this feels like this is on the right track. Oh, my anxiety, the bad feeling goes down. It becomes more excited. So if you knew that, there are 2 apartments that are probably the best choice. The minute you narrowed it down, that if you saw your anxiety go down, oh, okay, I am on the right track. That's it. And then as you're choosing one and you're thinking all the things that are going to close down for me, all the possibilities, shift and say, well, what if I choose this other one? What are the things that will open up? So again, it's just this mirror image of what's actually causing you suffering could also cause you that anticipation and that excitement. So I think that's one thing. Know that energy needs to go somewhere, so action is the best possibility. Choose a virtuous loop and spiral instead of the vicious one. And know that I think that, it's funny you bring up apartments. We just rented, or we're hopefully about to rent apartment in Manhattan. And we actually had a situation where the owner of the apartment we were about to rent, this was just 2.5 weeks ago, it turns out she's a felon. Unbeknownst to us, when she came back to the States to deal with my obsessive-compulsive checklist, actually, my punch list. I brought it should be like a true crime podcast, How Anxiety Caught a Criminal. They literally greeted her at the airport with handcuffs. It was
Only murders in the amygdala.
That's my favorite show. By the way, we haven't been able to watch the finale because we can't get it to stream here. What? I mean,
please. You can use my login. I'll give you my login.
Oh my God, thank you. So everything's blown out of the water. There's no inventory left in all of Manhattan, believe me. But anxiety, it's like I had to do something. And we found, we hustled, we found, we kind of lucked out and found this amazing place that's going to be better than anything. When I walked in, the anxiety, and then I realized that the anxiety that my husband had been having about that first place we were going to rent, I was pushing it through. He's like, something's not right about this. Now, I don't know if he was psychic. I don't know if there was a hidden bedroom behind a bookcase in that other apartment.
That's a red flag, Tracy.
We thought it was charming.
Was it wipe down? Like what?
I swear to God. We're like, this is such a quirky house. My husband was like, he was listening
With
to something.
scratch marks.
But the minute that it started falling through, my husband, actually, his anxiety went, my anxiety went up and it spurred me to action. I found the new place. His anxiety went down. It's this information. It's this, and as soon as we start playing with it a little, being a little more, having a little more humor, a little more hope. Yes, it sucks, but we can also I'm not saying have fun with anxiety. No one wants to be anxious, but if we can be more playful in the best sense of the word, meaning I can play, I can create, I can do something with this. I think when we feel stuck, that's the best way to approach.
Yeah, and I think also with anxiety, I've definitely done this where I've just removed myself from a situation.
Yeah.
But that's avoidant. That's not going
Not
to...
always. No, I had a really good friend who was in this new job. It was a startup. It was very, hairy, scary, hustle bustle like startups are. And she wanted to try it. She thought it would be a good fit for her. Every day she went in, she had this like sick feeling in her stomach. The heart was racing. It was, and at first she's like, maybe it's new, maybe it's but she realized pretty soon that, what, this is actually, it's not just that I'm anxious. It's my gut telling me this is a poor fit for me. And the minute, so she gave it a go. She really engaged with it, and she realized, wait a second, it's XYZ that's not working for me. I'm actually a person who doesn't want there to be a new thing thrown at me every day and new priorities. And I'm a person, and she sort of realized some things about herself because she tuned into it. And then in not an avoidant way, but in a choiceful way, she realized, I need to find another position. And she was able to. She found a job that was 20 times better. And so, again, it's that art of knowing when do we know that we're fleeing from it? And when do we know we're letting go of something? When do we know we've listened, we've leveraged? Now it's time to let go. But again, these are skills. This is something that we can all learn to do. It's the art. There is a right way to be anxious. There is an art to living. And we can practice it.
There's a right way to be anxious, and we can practice it. And I do think as well, my real visceral takeaway today is just change the vocabulary. Every time, like if something's making me feel anxious now, I'm going to really reframe it and put a jolly word against
Just see what happens. It might not work.
But it's more empowering to do that than to assume this means
what
something bad.
What if it works 50% of the time? You're ahead of the game. What if it works 65% of the time? You're crushing it.
Yeah.
And it's worth an experiment. Be a little curious. Be a little bit of a scientist.
Yeah. This has been so wonderful. I knew it was going to be fantastic to speak to you and see you in the flesh. It's
so much fun. So much more fun.
You must come back again.
Oh, please.
We'll do it. You're just going to be a regular now.
Oh, I love
because this is just.
Oh,
so
you better
helpful.
be careful. I mean,
it'll happen. It'll happen. The link to the book, which is here, looks like this. Next time you go into a bookshop or you're looking online, is available now. It is so brilliant, so helpful. If you think this conversation has been helpful, my goodness, getting to actually read every page of this book and have it in your home and dip into it when you need it.
Thank you for your
joyous.
support. It really means a lot. Thank you.
The links to your social media will be in the show notes.
Yes.
But it's been such a pleasure to speak to you again.
Thanks,
and this won't
Penny.
be the last time.
Thank you.